Good morning. I'll call to order with a much better microphone than I'm used to. The regular meeting of the March 24th Zoning and Planning Committee. I'm Lisa Bender. I chair the committee. We have a quorum today with Council Members Goodman, Andrew Johnson, Council President Johnson, and Council Member Warsame will be joining us shortly. We have 3 items on our agenda today. 2 items are on consent. The first is regulations for establishments, referring to staff and ordinance related to regulations for establishments that provide free food, clothing, and services. And then the second item is approving appointments to our Heritage Preservation Commission. These are 2 reappointments for folks who've already been serving. Laura Foucher, who's the excellent chair of our HPC, and Sue Hunter-Weir, who has in the past been a mayoral appointment, but is now shifting to be a council appointment. So I would move those 2 items. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Those 2 items carry. The third item is a discussion item, which is receiving from staff an update about the Minneapolis Comprehensive Plan. We'll be starting this significant effort here with this council action, but a lot of work has already happened, so I'd invite staff to come on up and please walk us through the presentation. This will give council members an opportunity to review the process that staff is going to use to update the comprehensive plan, and then we'll be approving some elements of the process.
Thank you. Madam Chair, good morning. Distinguished members of the committee, good morning. Thank you for your time today. As you know, CPED staff have done an enormous amount of work preparing the city, the community, and certainly our departments for the next comp plan update process. And so essentially we're here this morning for 2 reasons. One is to provide you with a brief update and overview of where we are in that comp plan process. And then secondly, to also request council action to direct us to, 1, officially begin that update process, and then 2, to receive and file the mission and values that will help to guide that update process. Okay. We're on the right page here, Tristan. All right. So as you may well know, okay, did I go too far? My apologies. As you may well know, the comp plan is required to be updated every 10 years. And so the next update is due at the end of 2018. And so that essentially gives us a 3-year window to get this critically important work done, which is certainly why your support and cooperation over the next 3 years will be invaluable to ensuring the success of this process. We are obligated, of course, as you know, to submit this plan to Met Council after the release of the Met Systems, 3 years after the release of the Met Systems statement, which I believe we have received those statements and we have acknowledged and approved those. And so finally, I think it's important to note that the comp plan is certainly much, much more than just a simple state requirement. It provides a forum for enterprise-wide coordination, collaboration, and engagement around some of the big questions that we need to ask ourselves and answer about our city's future. Questions about how our city is changing, about inclusive growth, economic competitiveness and resilience, and certainly questions about the changing demographics and diversity in our community. And so this is an opportunity to set the framework for planning our city's future based on principles guided by shared prosperity and equity. And with that being said, I'm going to ask Trustee Munson to come to the podium. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Executive Director Taylor, and thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. Indeed, CPED staff have been engaged in this process with Metropolitan Council in coordination with city leadership and staff for a couple of years now. Long-range planning staff facilitated the city's review and comment on Thrive MSP 2040 back in the spring of 2014. We then reviewed the region's 4 discrete policy plans for housing, transportation, water, and parks, and evaluated the region's projections for growth in Minneapolis for population, households, and jobs to 2040. Finally, we reviewed the Minneapolis Systems Statement, providing comment and action on all of these in coordination with city leaders throughout 2014 and 15. The resulting regional policy framework lays out expectations and requirements that our comprehensive plan must address and comply with. Requirements and growth projections for Minneapolis are public information and can be found on the Met Council website under community pages. Here's our page. On that page, guidance is provided for required plan elements, including land use, transportation, parks and trails, housing, resilience, economic competitiveness, and implementation. Each of these overarching plan elements has a number of specific topics that must be addressed within our plan. Here you see what's listed under land use as an example for Minneapolis. Detailed minimum requirements are provided for each topic area, which our plan must meet or exceed. In addition to what's evident under the category of plan elements, there are additional expectations we must meet. Natural resource protection, historic resource protection, and public facilities must be addressed according to the statute. We also consider equity a plan requirement from both a regional and city perspective, as well as a CPED directive, outlined in the department and division plans that we've developed with Executive Director Taylor over the last year. As the Executive Director mentioned, the plan must be completed by the end of 2018, including time for public comment and adjacent city review. We anticipate producing the plan in 5 phases. The launch phase is about mobilizing and informing the community about the update. The key directions phase is about defining an outline of priority policy topics. The policy framework phase is about shaping goals and policy language around those topics. In the policy document phase, we synthesize and draft actual chapters, and we end with the review phase. Each of these will include engagement strategies customized to that phase of work. As we think about what's important to us in 2015, looking out to 2040, we thought it would be interesting to look back at big themes that dominated Minneapolis plans of the past, and to recognize that these plans reflect and codify our values at any given time. They truly have an impact. In the 50s, the big ideas were about highways and helipads. In the 60s, urban renewal. In the 80s, environmental protection and downtown revitalization. In the aughts, mixed use and transit first. And in the 09 plan, sustainability, arts and culture, and multimodalism were big themes. In the current plan, the themes of equity, health, and opportunity have emerged as key values. This is the mission statement you'll find on one of your handouts, the Mission and Values Summary, which you have before you as a receive and file document today. Minneapolis 2040, an inspiring city growing in equity, health, and opportunity. On that same handout, you'll find a brief outline of the comprehensive plan values, which are based on the values and strategic directions adopted by the city in 2014. They've been further informed by engagement across the enterprise, as well as with leadership. First, growth. We'll plan for more people, businesses, housing, and jobs in the city, and accommodate growth in appropriate locations while enhancing community character. Equity. We'll promote fair and just opportunities and outcomes for all people, and work to eliminate the gaps between white people and people of color. Sustainability. We'll move beyond mitigation and begin building resiliency to climate changes and impacts with sustainable social and environmental systems. Livability. We'll ensure that all neighborhoods in Minneapolis are safe, green, healthy, and inviting, affordable, and served by connected and accessible systems and amenities. Competitiveness. We'll strengthen economic competitiveness to fuel growth and economic sustainability while supporting public and private sector innovation. And good government. We'll develop and maintain a fiscally sustainable government that works for everyone with fair and transparent public systems. The resolution before you today outlines key policy topics that the comprehensive plan will need to address. Notable new areas of interest for this comprehensive plan, as opposed to plans of the past, are technology and innovation and public health as it pertains to the built environment. The resolution identifies 8 steering committee members, including the Executive Director of Community Planning and Economic Development, Craig Taylor, the City Coordinator, Spencer Cronk, the Mayor, Betsy Hodges, the Chair of Zoning and Planning, Councilmember Lisa Bender, the Chair of Transportation and Public Works, Councilmember Kevin Reich, the Health Commissioner, Gretchen Musicant, the Director of Public Works, Steve Kotke, and a Manager of Equity and Inclusion, Joy Stevens. Finally, we've also established a clear set of goals for civic engagement. We aspire to meaningful and relevant dialogue, inclusive representation, transparency and access to information and opportunities to engage, empowerment and a feeling that contributions have been heard and responded to, and effective use of city resources. We're planning to launch public engagement for the plan at the Community Connections Conference on April 2nd, and are grateful for the involvement of you, Madam Chair, as well as the Mayor, Council President Johnson, and Councilmember Reich in that launch. Our website has been under development and will go live the same day. That site will be a platform for engagement and information sharing, including interactive maps that will provide users with real-world and policy insights about each of our comp plan values. To make a long story short, committee members, we are ready to begin. Our request to this committee today is to adopt the resolution officially launching the comprehensive plan update and establishing City Council expectations of staff in the delivery of that plan. And secondly, to receive and file the supporting documentation. Thank you for your generous time and for your consideration of this item.
Councilmember Goodman has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. We'll start with, when I look at your community engagement plan to date, it's not very robust as it pertains to people who don't use technology at all.
Yeah.
So we know that a percentage of our population, and it's a fairly significant percentage of people who are older, are not going to be tweeting with the planner, meeting in a box, participating in the interactive piece of it, social media or digital workshops.
Yeah.
So what is the outreach plan for people who don't have access or comfort with technology? I have a number of questions, so I'll ask them one at a time.
I'm so glad you asked that question. Go ahead.
And if I might jump in, I appreciate the question and look
Yes.
forward to your answer. I do also have a staff direction today that will ask staff to come back with a detailed engagement plan with the expectation that every council member who wants to sit down and review the list of stakeholders, the engagement strategies, and the timeline has a chance to give those detailed comments before it would come back through this committee. But I think that staff is likely ready to give some general answers today.
That's right. And Madam Chair, Councilmember Goodman, thank you for the question. We do have a robust civic engagement plan that goes beyond what you see in this presentation. And I'd like to invite Beth Elliott, who's really our facilitator and captain of that effort, to come up and speak to that item.
Good morning, Madam Chair and council members. So I really appreciate the question, and I think that it's a very good question. So let me go through a little bit of detail about what we're thinking about for civic engagement. And we do have behind the 2-page roadmap that you got in your packet, about a 40-page document that's in its final review right now, and that I understand will be now reviewed by council members. So I think that's a very good thing. I want to mention that too, that we created these civic engagement goals. We have a lot of objectives under them. A lot of what you'll see is inclusive representation, meaningful dialogue. A lot of that does not happen with technology. And so we have designed our engagement process for basically any personality and skill set and ability to participate. So we will use technology, absolutely. There's a lot of great elements to our website. I am not someone who naturally lends my personality to just being on technology. I like to talk and interact with people. And so what we have are in-person interactions. We have these large group events like Community Connections Conference, and then we will have technology. And so let me give you some examples. So large convening events. It's Community Connections Conference. It's going to be a key directions meeting later in the year for the staff research teams to talk about the key directions that they've developed, the priorities in their teams. We will be doing a lot of mobile engagement. This is, I think, going to be the most prominent feature of our engagement process, is going out to where people are and naturally gather. So we want to do a lot of interaction at street festivals, cultural festivals, events where people gather, like religious institutions, community centers. We will be going to people because we know that a lot of people don't have the time or inclination or ability to come to us to engage. So that's also where technology comes into play too. There's a lot of people who won't come to a large meeting, but they might at midnight be on their computer fiddling around and want to engage
See an
that way.
online petition telling us to do some kooky thing and
Well,
then
could
send
be
it
that
in.
too.
This is the problem with this technology that
Yeah.
we have now, is that people don't even have to know what they're contacting us
Yes.
about. If some organization sends them an email saying I've had people contact me and say, I got an email from so-and-so telling me to ask you to do this, please do this.
Yes.
There's no like explanation of what sometimes they email me and say, I'm not sure even what I'm emailing you about, but I
Yeah.
trust this organization. And as
Yeah.
you can see in zoning and planning type issues, you can easily generate an online petition without even knowing
Yep.
where people are coming from.
So we will be tracking all of the information. We have a civic engagement team that I've been leading for a few months to develop a lot of the information and outlined details in the civic engagement plan. We have also been creating documentation techniques, because what we really care about is making sure that we have this inclusive process, but that also it's transparent, the information we're getting. So we'll be tracking a lot of information, but one of our first elements, at least on the website, is going to be an open question related to big ideas. So the conference on April 2nd is about big ideas. It's the way we're starting the civic engagement process. What are your big ideas for 2040? Is it helipads? Probably not.
But what, okay, Madam Chair, but what if it's banning live animal circuses?
So we have to accept the comments.
So we're just going to open the door to anything anyone wants to do. So others could say, send more police to Muslim neighborhoods. Are we going to say that that's an acceptable thing?
No.
I mean, yeah, on the left, everyone's like, okay, that's kind of interesting and funny.
Yeah.
But on the right, it might not be so interesting and funny. So are we just letting anyone throw out any idea and we're going to seriously consider it in our comp plan? This is supposed to be an economic development, transportation,
right.
and land use plan.
So I think what your mission statement and resolution clarify is that this is a plan about the natural, built, and economic environment. Those are the topics that we will focus on. We will not be able to do engagement on every topic of that the policy groups are looking at, because that is just infeasible. But we will be prioritizing particularly the requirements of the Met Council. We'll be focusing on the natural, built, and economic environment. And there's a lot of elements. Public health fits into that really
Right,
well.
so banning
Other
live
topics.
animals from circuses is really a public health thing, because you maybe could get the Zika virus from lions
Yeah.
who come to circuses.
Yeah.
So that's a public health thing. I mean, I can see this playing out with advocacy organizations, with the way this has been set up, more than in the past, and I'm concerned about it. It seems like our staff is saying, come to us with all of your ideas, good or bad, and when there are ideas on the left, everyone thinks it's okay, but, there could be people on the right throwing out their ideas too, Donald Trump type ideas that we might not want in our comp plan. So how are you going to determine what of these crazy ideas meet this criteria? My example of banning lions probably does have some basis in public health. And
We will be looking at themes. And so the planners are running the engagement process, but what we hope to achieve is participation from other departments, because they have expertise that we don't have. We hope to be having participation from a lot of other people at the city, but the planners are going to be distilling a lot of the information. So we will be tracking all the comments we receive. We have a responsibility to do that, but we will be looking for themes. So if only one person said banning, circuses, that's not a theme that we're seeing rising to the top.
50 people will say it, though, as soon as the organization working on that sends out an email saying, send in your comments with regard to the comp plan. Are we like Pollyanna about what's going to happen here?
No. So when we think about consensus, we don't think about everyone agreeing. We think about everyone being heard. So a prominent element of our civic engagement plan is always, when we do engagement, going out to a community group, going out to cultural organizations, saying, this is what we heard from you last time. This is how we were able to use some of that information. This is why we weren't able to use some elements that you talked about last time, like banning circuses. And this is how we are moving forward, and we will use the information we get from you today. So it's always about being transparent about what we heard, what we can use, what's not relevant to a comprehensive plan, and then moving forward and constantly doing that discussion about how your voice was heard and how we were able to use it or not.
I think one other important piece, I have two kind of, well, first of all, I think I might suggest that we have a discussion here in the committee about the engagement piece now. I think Councilmember Goodman may have other questions about other things, but I think probably others will have these too. So, and I think it's really important. Because I also have concerns about the amount of staff time that we might be spending on engagement. And I think that the expectations from everyone in the city are higher than they were 10 years ago around engagement. And I also know that we have more and different tools at our disposal. And I think we are also being more intentional and getting better, but still have room for improvement about reaching all of the different constituencies in our city. And so, but that may be some sort of, I'm a little concerned that that's a black hole of time that we don't have staff adequate to support. And so that's one reason why I think this staff direction today will help us get more detail on what's being planned, and will help the council understand how much staff time we are expecting to spend, and give staff the ability to say, you know, we may need to say no to some things. We may need to strategically orient our time. And I know this is already part of what staff is thinking about, but I think we just need more detail. The other piece I think is worth mentioning now is the intention is that we would be bringing through some of these pieces to the council at different checkpoints throughout this process. And I think that is really critical for such a long time span for a project that covers so many things, and that, in my opinion, we will need to continue to focus and refocus on sort of the three main elements that Councilmember Goodman mentioned, which I agree, you know, which is the built environment, our infrastructure systems, and our, you know, our natural environment and our economic development goals. And so I think we're going to look at those things through the lenses of health or environmental sustainability or equity, but that we will, as a body, need to continue to refocus this plan on the sort of core elements of what a comp plan is. And maybe there will be other ideas that come out that council members will want to respond to in other ways, but that this plan isn't supposed to be the plan for every single policy in the city that everyone ever wants to do. So I think those checkpoints back through the council will give us an opportunity as a body to help refocus that work, to respond to what our constituents and stakeholders are saying, to check in with staff about how we're doing on the amount of staff time that's being spent on engagement. Maybe we would need to correct, you know, some pieces halfway through or whatever, but we'll have those opportunities through the full council over time. So I didn't, Councilmember Good, did you have anything else on engagement? Otherwise, Council President maybe had some comments.
Just one other question. So why isn't the comp plan kickoff its own thing? Why are we taking it to this Community Connections Conference, which is essentially a group of advocates, rather than having a kickoff that would be inclusive of people who don't participate in neighborhood organizations and or are not already part of David Rubador's cabal of groups?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Goodman, that is a great question. So the timing worked out well, and we looked at the Community Connections Conference as an opportunity with the comprehensive plan to broaden the traditional audience that it usually reaches.
But they are the traditional audience.
Well,
that's like the epitome of the traditional audience are the people that come to that.
So Rose Lindsay in our office, who has been actively working on communications and promotion of the conference, which is a unique and new tool for the conference. And what she, even this last week, David Rubador and I were on La Raza Radio and KMOJ promoting the conference. And so what Rose has been really trying to do is reach out to people who wouldn't normally hear about it. She sent a Gov Delivery to 10,000 business licensed businesses in Minneapolis. And so she's doing a lot of things that wouldn't normally be done. And what has resulted is that we have the numbers are much further past than what they have been in the past years. So we have 500 or so people signed up for the conference right now. The comprehensive plan is one of 3 topics at the conference. So we have 6 sessions that are being led by directors from the city and long-range planning staff on those broad topics, those comp plan core values. And in each of our sessions, we have almost 80 people. So why this is an important kickoff is because we're going to be reaching potentially 500 people. We couldn't neglect this opportunity, but what we are going to be doing is seeing who was at this conference and then evaluating our outreach efforts, our in-person outreach efforts after this conference, so we can do some very targeted outreach.
So the answer is because we decided to do it.
Council President.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm glad we're having this discussion. As I think about when you talk about your typical audiences, that's who I'm going to hear from, in my neighborhoods, or who are going to access some of this outreach as I hear it laid out now. My concern is for, and I represent part of North Minneapolis, obviously, people that are really disaffected at this point. I had a whole series, and I know my colleagues got copies of emails from a number of my constituents concerned about some of the disparities that exist vis-a-vis the rest of the city, and the way North Minneapolis exists at this point, and sort of, in the frame of, why are you worrying about these other things when, we're waking at 2 o'clock in the morning with gunshots on a regular basis? So, how do you plan on getting at those people who perhaps, they sent emails, so I give them credit for that, but that one email represents 200 people who feel exactly the same way. And many of them, like Councilmember Goodman said, are not technology savvy. They're not going to go to a community meeting. They don't belong to, some of these community organizations. They're not going to go to a cultural festival, because I think we only have probably about 2 of them in North Minneapolis in a summer. So how do you get at those people, and how do you listen to them and have, as a part of this comprehensive plan, what are we going to do to change the trajectory here of this community that is so different from the rest of the city?
That's a great question. And I think part of framing the conversation about, we know all of this is coming, and we have to start by saying what the comprehensive planning process can do and what it can't do. It can't be everything to everyone. And so that conversation is important, but that has to be a supplement to this process, probably led by people other than planners who are working on the comprehensive plan. It's our job to listen and incorporate those aspects of that have an impact on, as Beth said, the built, natural, and economic environment, and those policies that we feel can contribute to the solution. But of course, that solution is going to be very custom and much bigger and more detailed than what we could achieve in the comprehensive plan. And I wanted to speak to the previous item too, about just sort of opening the doors and letting everybody have ideas. I think that is something we heard early on and worked really hard to set a framework up to avoid this kind of, it's everything. So I just want to say this idea of engaging the public first on these 6 comprehensive plan values. We're going out and saying, on the topic of sustainability, let's talk about that topic. That's a topic that we know we need to address as a city. On the topic of economic competitiveness, let's talk about that, so that we're not just going out with an open tabula rasa and saying, what do you want to talk about? We're really framing that conversation around what we know are the city's goals and objectives. And then the next phase, the key directions phase, is really informed by these robust staff research teams who will be looking at existing policy, seeking information from our public engagement process. And this diagram shows the communication between that policy development and civic engagement. But again, we will be taking key directions to the public in a public meeting forum, and not just going out and asking kind of tabula rasa, what do you think we should do? So those are specifically so that we can begin to shape a conversation that is appropriate to the comprehensive plan scope and purpose, and that we can try to manage and make informed decisions about whether we should engage on a certain topic or whether that's better handled through another process. I hope that helps to inform.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing I was really surprised, very surprised to see missing from this is there is no talk, even though we talk about cultural festivals and meetings in a box and all of this, that there's no mention of going into our schools and engaging young people. I mean, these are people that are in 2040 going to be entering their 40s. And in between, they're going to be making decisions about where they want to live, starting a family, and they're ultimately inheriting this city. And I know Edina, for instance, when they did their comp plan process or their planning process, they went out into classrooms, sat down with young people and said, what do you want our city to look like as we're changing? So I really, really hope that that is a integral part of this. And I did have some additional comments. And I also want to point out on that note too, I think you can kill two birds with one stone because it's an opportunity to teach these young people a lesson in civic engagement and help better connect them with their local government. But I think you're going to respond to this. So.
I am. So, Madam Chair, Councilmember Johnson. So, yes, the answer is yes. Just because you don't see it on our two-pager, and this is again why a two-pager might be a simplistic version of this 40-page document. We have a section in this document, the full document, about key audiences. And part of the key audience element is to reach people who are traditionally underrepresented in civic life. Because this is a 20-year document, reaching youth is one of the key audiences for us. And some ways that we have thought about doing that are through cultural festivals, because a lot of families show up at those, but it's also through working with the park board and the school board. We have members of both of those boards and staff on our research teams. But what we really hope to do is be able to do exactly what you're talking about. We want to focus on youth. So yes, we've thought about that, and that is a priority for us.
Good, and I really would encourage you to actually get into the classrooms. I'm sure for the schools, you know, setting aside a half day or a day exercise for students on this would be a great lesson learned for the youth and a huge opportunity for us to get that vital feedback.
And Madam Chair, Council President, Council Member Johnson, excuse me, I wanted to add one thing that I haven't even had a chance to talk with Beth about yet. I serve on the youth cabinet, and so does steering committee member Gretchen Musicant, and so does the city coordinator Spencer Kronk. And we were actually at the last youth cabinet meeting talking about this issue of how do we ensure that the youth lens is present in the planning process. The Anna Groot from Youth Coordinating Board has offered to be that bridge and really invite the Youth Coordinating Board to participate in the process. And also the youth cabinet has offered to really just be a reader, almost like a contributor to each of our policy topics and provide input from a youth perspective. So we think that's a great potential asset to the process.
Good, and a few other things I wanted to mention here too. Communities of faith, I'm sure that's part of your plan. Neighborhood associations, sending out letters to everyone, I think even is appropriate. Block club leaders, leveraging those. Making sure we are being geographically specific as well.
Yes.
Taking the difference between the citywide lens and the neighborhood lens. And then the last piece, and I'm just, I guess, going to kind of throw a dialogue out here about this, but, you know, coming from a systems engineering background and taking user input and feedback, it seems to me like sometimes when you ask people for feedback, they'll just give you anything because you happen to be asking, and they might not actually feel very intensely about it. They may just say, oh, sure, change the font color here, make this box bigger, what have you. Or when you're looking at the city, yeah, add more trees or this or that. They might not actually really feel strongly about that. And I want to make sure that when we're doing this, we're also not just grabbing or gathering the public feedback, but that we're really thinking critically about how things are going to be changing and really putting together a vision around this, not just basing this plan off of our public feedback, but really creating a strong vision, because we're going to have emerging technologies and industries and trends that we're not even thinking about right now in the public consciousness, things like self-driving cars. How's that going to influence what our city looks like in 10 years, let alone 20 or 30? What about changing industries in manufacturing. I know there's a huge, when you think about 3D printing and what's coming in that arena, you can really see manufacturing being decentralized, localized, lots of changes there. So I want to make sure that we are thinking about the future in that way and planning for it so that 10 years from now, we're meeting it where it is and we're not constantly playing catch up, which is what I think a lot of cities end up doing. So.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Johnson, very happy to hear that, and we're absolutely on the same page. And I can tell you, particularly with technology, we have rapidly been expanding our purview and looking at what other cities are doing from an infrastructure perspective, from an economic development perspective, and also from these future systems perspective. And I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but in about 6 months, we probably will have federal legislation related to particularly self-driving cars. And I think 6 states already have state legislation, so we can look to that and start to think about how we incorporate those things here.
So I want to make sure that we get to all of the other elements
Madam
in the
Chair,
resolution.
yes.
So I want to see, so I think we have seen that council members are going to be very interested in community engagement. And I know that's no surprise to the staff that's been leading this, and I'm sure you have answers to lots of these questions. But so I'm going to go ahead and move this staff direction now, which the council members here have in front of everyone, which is staff is directed to report back to the Zoning and Planning Committee with a detailed community engagement plan for each of the planning process phases for the Minneapolis Comprehensive Plan that identifies stakeholders, engagement methods, and a general engagement calendar by May 19th, 2016. That's a Zoning and Planning Committee date. And I would highly encourage staff to reach out to every council office and meet with council members and or their staff to get this detailed feedback that I know all of the council offices is going to have. So is there any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. That carries. So then there are several, I just want to make sure that everyone also notes that there is a resolution authored by Councilmember Reich and myself. Councilmember Reich is traveling on business today, so can't be here, but I want to make sure that we go through some of these other elements. The resolution does go through the sort of background and legal context and requirements from the Met Council, but we also include some of those pieces that you had in your presentation, one of which is these the statements of our goals. And so we used the adopted goals that this council had discussed and adopted when we first all took office. But I think there are some small changes to that exact language and framework, and I want to make sure to that everyone knows where that came from and what is in front of us. Could you talk more about those things and how they relate to the goals that we adopted as a council at the beginning of our term?
Sure. I think still the seedbed were the council goals. But we engaged as a staff with department heads and management teams across the enterprise to understand priorities of the enterprise, where department heads and management teams felt we were going to need to develop new policy, what were the big issues that they thought that we would need to engage in as a city looking forward. And then we also engaged with both our leadership forum in the months in advance of identifying who steering committee members would be, and then the steering committee to shape and refine these particular 6 goals or values. So that's how we developed it. I think they're still strongly rooted in what was adopted in 2014, but with minor refinements.
Does anyone have any questions or comments about that piece of this? Okay. And then finally, we have some of the other process pieces. So the structure that staff has recommended and we have been discussing is to have research teams of our staff from citywide enterprise. And I think a number of council members here have commented on that list, and it was narrowed down. But could you talk through that piece and how we intend to have those research teams kind of engage in this work and what we would expect to come out of them?
Absolutely. So yeah, we really felt it was important to have subject matter experts evaluating existing policy and making recommendations to us about where we thought we needed new policy or to make corrections in existing policy. And so we reached out and formed these staff research teams in order to get that subject matter expertise. So, when we talked, for instance, to Gretchen Musicant and the health management group, public health management group, they had a lot of ideas that were very, very relevant to planning, things like walkability. So those kinds of ideas we want to bring forward and say, well, gee, we didn't really get too deep into that in our last comprehensive plan. I believe Gretchen said there were maybe 1 or 2 sentences related to health. Of course, as we look across the country now, we see cities making this a major topic in their comprehensive plans, this idea of health, walkability, bikeability, livability, and sustainability. So we wanted to cull those themes out as well as build the staff teams and the staff resources around them to make informed recommendations going forward.
And we had some discussion about this and had, I think, decided that if members of our city boards and commissions that advise the council and other bodies on these subject matters wanted to participate, that they would be invited to participate as well in these research teams. That's
correct. In fact, I believe we are really hopeful that that won't even be optional, that we will have boards and committees engaged in these topics, either participating directly in that conversation or as a technical advisor, so that we're engaging too with representative citizens.
Does anyone have any questions or comments about that piece? Okay, I think we're good. Does that conclude staff's presentation?
That concludes our presentation.
Right, so I will go ahead then and move to receive and file the presentation, as well as move the resolution authored by myself and Councilmember Reich. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. And that carries. Thank you so much for everyone's work. I'll just note that there are a lot of staff who are not here in the audience today that have been really engaged in this work, and we really value all of their time and contributions. And thanks again. With that, we are adjourned.